may be the greatest catch I've ever seen in my life.
Okay, boys, please help me out here. Let me know what kind of videos y'all are going to want to see during the season. I know we can do the players to target. We can do players that we're wanting to add. But outside of that, would y'all like nightly recaps? Would y'all like me to go through and just see across the league what is trending on a week-to-week basis? Please go down to that comment section. Let me know that. And also, I want to remind everyone, if you're a new listener to the channel, guys, that comment section is going to be so useful because a lot of y'all watching these videos, you know more about fantasy baseball than I do. You are a better fantasy baseball player than I am. So yes, we're still going to be trying to help you as much as I can. But if you know more and you can go through and weigh in with your opinion down in the comment section below, not only is that going to help me, but more importantly, will it help everybody else watching these videos. So please, guys, if I say something that you don't agree with in any video going forward, go to the comment section. You can be as mean as you want to be. I don't care, but please try to help everybody else watching the video. And lastly, guys, let's try to get those likes up on the videos. What are we doing? And yeah, that's it for the announcements. Let's get into this video. And what we are going to be doing is we are going to be looking through the first 3 days of the year. And we're going to go, what are some players who started off slow? And no, these are not guys you need to worry about. Okay, please understand this. It's a extremely small sample, what we are looking at right now. Now, if anything, if you play in a new fantasy baseball league where your league mates don't really know how to play, I guess you could call them trade targets, but I'm not even willing to do that because pretty much everybody knows. It's a very small sample, but what we want to do is we want to start tracking what players are starting slow, what players are starting hot, and see if we still need to worry about this 2 weeks from now. 2 weeks from now, we're seeing these trends continue. Then that's where we can get concerned. That's when we can have the real conversation. But for now, we're just going to be identifying the players that have had a very poor start to the season. And we are going to be going through and talking about what I thought about them going into fantasy baseball drafts this year. But the first player we're going to bring up is Fernando Tatis Jr. I'm sure that a lot of people are going to be talking about his opening week because so far he's played 2 games, which I know is not a lot. He's had 9 plate appearances. And with Fernando Tatis Jr., yes, he was an elite fantasy baseball asset coming into the year. He was being drafted 2nd overall. And spoiler alert, guys, Fernando Tatis Jr. is still the 2nd best player in fantasy baseball. These first 2 games mean nothing. So please, if you have him, if you drafted him, do not be willing to trade him away. Just want to talk about why we should be ignoring these first 2 games, which he had 9 plate appearances, 1 hit, 1 walk, and 5 strikeouts. So obviously, those are concerning numbers, but you go to Fernando Tatis Jr., and there's a reason he was being drafted 2nd overall this year. I mean, he is only 22 years old. He's playing in a lineup where you want their hitters. You want to target the Padres because they should have a decent amount of run production, playing shortstop. And what we want to do here is we want to look at the 2 prior seasons from Fernando Tatis Jr. And sadly, we don't have extremely large sample sizes in either one of these seasons. We know 2020 is weird on so many different occasions. But in 2019, he had 334 at-bats. He posted a 317 batting average, a 379 on base percentage, a 590 slugging, and 13 stolen bases. And this was all at 20 years old, guys. 20 years old, he was doing this in the major league. These are not minor league stats. And then in 2020, yes, he takes a small step backwards, but we can all acknowledge the fact that, guys, 2020 was so weird. A lot of these players didn't even know if they were going to get to play a season. So because of that, because the sample size is small, I want to make sure that we are discounting this production. Where in 2020, at 21 years old, he had 224 at-bats, a 277 batting average, a 366 on base percentage, a 571 slugging, and 11 stolen bases. So yes, these numbers are still fantastic, but they just don't live up to what we saw in 2019. But 2019 was the normal year, and he was only 20 years old. So now, where he should be turning 23 this season, I think that we can all look at Fernando Tatis Jr. and agree that he is that elite asset. Please, please, please do not be trading him for Mike Trout. Do not be doing anything like that at the beginning of the year. If you're just now getting into fantasy baseball, we have a long road to go. So do not overreact to these first few games. All right. So now let's get our next player up here. It's going to be an outfielder for the San Francisco Giants, Mike Yastrzemski. And I know I probably just completely butchered that name, but we're going to continue to ignore it. So he's 30 years old, was being drafted at 139 overall in high-stakes drafts this year. And with Mike, we don't really have one full season that we can look at, very similar to Fernando Tatis. Sadly, in 2019, it was a small sample, and 2020 it was as well. But what we can do is we can combine the past 3 years of 2019, 2020, and 2021, combine all the plate appearances, do the math, and figure out his career. I don't want to call him career, but past 3 season average. And here, if you combine those past 3 seasons, he's had 572 at-bats, which looks like just one regular year, so I'm fine taking the numbers from this. A 276 batting average, a 526 slugging, and 4 stolen bases. Now, 2020 was the best year in this sample, and if anything, I would prefer that to be the opposite because 2020 was so wild. Maybe you just saw Mike be prepared for the season where some other players weren't. So here, it's an intriguing case. In 2021, he's played 3 games so far. He's had 14 plate appearances and only 1 hit. This is good for a 0.077 average. 6 strikeouts to go along with it. Now, still, even with the player that was going down a lot further in drafts, I want to just echo the fact that you shouldn't be panicking. Okay, it's 3 games. Now, if we get to a 20-game stretch and we are still seeing the lack of production, that's when we go, crap, we need to change our priors. We need to start looking at moving his value. But for now, if you liked him enough to draft him in your fantasy baseball league, you like him enough to keep him on your roster. Okay, so now let's go over to the third base position, and let's talk about Eduardo Escobar, who's playing for Arizona, obviously, 32 years old, and he was going at the end of fantasy baseball drafts this season at 278 overall in those high-stakes leagues. And here, when we're looking at his numbers, I actually kind of like the fact that he was going in this range, because in 2019, he saw 636 at-bats, so a ridiculous number. 5 stolen bases where, yes, 5 stolen bases sound nice for a third baseman. You're not drafting for stolen bases, but we can also acknowledge the fact the man had 636 at-bats. So if you're expecting that number to go down about 550, then that stolen bases number should go down as well. A 269 batting average, a 320 on-base percentage, and a 511 slugging. And here's the problem. Okay, so you look at this 2019 year, the year that I really like to go through because it's the most recent example of a full regular season that we have for any of these players. And he seems like he was a great value in that range. But then you dive into it a little bit more and go, hey, 2019 kind of looks like an outlier season for him because his slugging percentage at 511, with this massive sample, keep in mind, was his career high in his 11-year career. And it wasn't even close, to be honest. So that's something that you have to look at. You have to go, okay, that's concerning. Probably not going to be able to maintain. And in 2020, everything falls off. A 212 average, a 270 on base percentage, a 335 slugging. And now in 2021, he's had 8 at-bats, a total of 0 hits, total of 0 walks, just 4 strikeouts to go along with it. So here with Eduardo Escobar, I will say that he profiles to be someone that I would at least initially think with my monkey brain that we would love him to be grabbing at a discount based on that 2019 production. But then that 2019 production really looks like a massive outlier over his entire career. So yeah, this is going to be a player, you drafted him very late. If he doesn't turn it around in a few weeks, you may possibly look to cut him off your roster. Of course, it's going to depend on what we see. Okay, so now our last player we're going to be talking about, playing in one of the best lineups in baseball, Yoan Moncada, who right now is just completely disappointing owners. And this is surprising. I thought that we were going to see a hot start for him, especially if you consider how the White Sox have been. But anyway, if we go through and just kind of profile him, he was going at that 83rd overall pick in high-stakes leagues, only 25 years old, playing at the third base position, so you're not necessarily expecting his production to be in line with someone like a first baseman, someone like an outfielder. No, you're drafting him at third base, a position that doesn't have a massive supply of guys, so you're going to be expecting a small discount in production compared to some other positions in that range. But anyway, if we go through what he's done over the past 2 years, in 2019, only at 23 years old, He had 511 at-bats, 10 stolen bases, which is very nice for a third baseman. 315 batting average, a 367 on-base percentage, and a 548 slugging. And in 2020, he had 200 at-bats, a 225 average, a 320 on-base percentage, a 385 slugging. So yes, you see that setback in 2020, but like I've said so many times before, I do not care. I do not care about the hitters that saw the setback. I want to see that 2019 production, which you had from Moncada. And then we go through in 2021. Now, he's been disappointing. He's had played 2 games, 9 plate appearances, 2 hits, 1 walk, and 6 strikeouts. But mainly I'm bringing him up here saying, guys, if for whatever reason you have a buy window open for any of these players, maybe you're playing in a league where people don't understand how much of a marathon fantasy baseball is, then you can go out there and you can try to use this as a moment to just make a trade. If you get a 5% discount on a player like Fernando Tatis Jr., say you took him, or I'm sorry, your opponent took him 1 pick before you took Mike Trout, and you can just make that switch right now for no apparent reason, that would be fantastic. So please understand that this small sample barely means anything. If you can use it to your advantage in a league where your league mates don't really know what they're doing, then more power to you. But that's it, guys. Thank you all for coming out. Thank you for supporting the channel. As always, go down there, drop a like, leave a comment, and I'll see y'all with the video tomorrow.